Hey, how's it going, folks? Good afternoon, everyone. Let me know in the comments that you're here and if you can see me and hear me okay. And we'll get this thing started in a few minutes. But I'll just give a few minutes for all of you to start piling through and joining me on this great topic today that we'll be speaking about with my awesome guest. So let me know in the comments. Hit like if you have anyone in your network interested in hearing more about interview tips, strategy, tactics. That's what my guest today, John Ribeiro, will be speaking about with myself. So make sure you share the stream if you feel this might be beneficial to anyone in your network. And let me know in the comments who you are, where you're tuning in from, and make sure you hit like as well. It's going to be a great session, folks, and a lot of information today. So today's focus is we'll definitely cover job search topics in general, but the focus definitely today is, and what John is really passionate about, and what I really wanted John to speak about is this whole topic about interview strategy, interview tactics, tips, building that confidence, how to build rapport with interviewers, all this great information that's going to help all of you with your interviews, right? So everybody hit like, let me know in the comments where you're coming in, where you're tuning in from, and then I'm gonna bring my amazing guest on, and we're gonna get this thing rolling. All right, I don't see any comments. I see some likes. I don't see any comments yet, folks. Don't be shy. Put in the comments. Let me know where you're tuning in from, and also start putting in your interview questions. Any and all of your interview questions. All right, I see the comments coming in. So Dhruv, hey Dhruv, thanks for tuning in. So Dhruv is tuning in from Toronto. So thanks for tuning in, Dhruv. And what I'm gonna do, folks, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna bring John on, and we're gonna get this thing started and rolling. But in the comments, definitely let us know your your interview questions. So I got Nikki coming in from Weatherford, Texas. Wow, okay, amazing. Thanks so much for tuning in, Nikki. So folks, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and also in the comments all of your interview questions. We're gonna be covering all of those. I see people coming in from Toronto. Who's that? Siddhant from Toronto. I see Akash. Hey, Akash, all the way from Nepal. Thanks so much for tuning in. Different time zone too. I've got Abdel Adi from North Carolina, I believe. Got Amir. Amir, hey, Amir. Thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate that. So, folks, all your interview-related questions, put them in the comments. I'm going to bring my guest today, John, live right now, and we're going to get this thing rolling. And for those of you tuning in from, shout out to everyone tuning in from Facebook. Obviously, all of you on LinkedIn over here are ready to roll right now. Again, all your comments, feel free to put it in the comment section. Vimal, thanks so much for tuning in. Vimal is coming in from Saskatchewan. Thanks so much. So without further ado, I'm going to add my guest, John Ribeiro, today, and let's get this thing rolling. Hey, John, how's it going?
I'm great, Dean. How are you doing, buddy? It's
awesome.
It's nice to finally flip the script on this one, because I know I'm the one pulling you into calls and
that's
your
right.
advice and expertise. So yeah, no, it's fantastic to be here. I'm so happy to be here with you.
That's right. Yeah, amazing to have you here, John. And for those of you who don't know, John has and we'll be speaking about John's podcast later on. But John has an amazing podcast called the Zero2Hired podcast. I've been a guest on his show. I think on 2 occasions. It's a great podcast. And, John will be providing more information about that. Make sure you follow that podcast as well. And I definitely felt like this was long overdue, so I'm glad to have you on the show, John. So folks, for those of you who don't know John, I'm going to give you an introduction about John and in terms of his background and his credentials. And we're going to get right into, talking about interviews. So John Ribeiro is a passionate, results-driven professional and an enthusiastic performance coach. He's a certified master NLP practitioner and certified leadership coach. And just a heads up, by NLP, he's speaking about neuro-linguistic programming, okay? Not natural language processing, like some of the natural language processing people out there might get confused. But he's a master NLP practitioner. That's neuro-linguistic programming. He has over 20 years of experience in leading high-performing teams in the information technology field and has trained and coached thousands of professionals on leadership, career development, and personal performance. John is the co-founder of the Canadian Job Search Academy. He's committed to giving back to the global community in a meaningful way. He's also active on social media, sharing tips and strategies on living a fulfilled and meaningful life. John's mantra is the more you experience, the more you have to offer others. John, I love that mantra, and welcome to the show.
Thanks. Actually, I stole that mantra from somebody, and it was the lady who founded Spanx, Sarah Blakely.
Oh, yes, I
Yeah,
love her.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I heard an interview with her one time, and it really resonated with me in terms of, it's so true. The more you do experience, the more you do have to offer others. So I kind of took it and made it my own motto as well. So yeah, no, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I gave credit to where credit is due.
Yeah,
I don't want to take all
absolutely.
the credit for stuff, right?
Absolutely. And I think you really do kind of live that mantra, John, because I see you posting on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and you're always sharing so much great information. And I especially love I think it's called your 30-day. I can't remember the name of it. Like, what was it called?
The most recent one was the 31-day step up challenge, where I invited people to step up over a period of 31 days. It was last month. So in the month of May, I did that every day for the month of May, with the commitment of really delivering value to the people that I was, offering up information to up on social. And it was really around asking coaching questions, because one of the things I do as a coach is really around asking those questions that, force you to go deep to get the answers, and to get honest with yourself. And you know this, right? Because I know you do some coaching as well. It's all around creating an awareness of what it is you can do to get better, an awareness of what you need to do in order to get to the things that you want to achieve. So that's where I put a lot of my focus last month. And yeah, it was a great campaign. I had a lot of great feedback from a lot of great people. So yeah, I'm really happy I had the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely amazing.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Dean, because I've been watching your live events as well, and you've taken this and you've taken it up to the next level. So you're giving some great value back to this amazing community that you serve. So
thank you for
thanks.
That. Yeah, thanks so much, John. Appreciate that. So, before we get started, folks, make sure you connect with John. He's a great person to connect with, especially on LinkedIn. I believe you're active on Facebook as well as. I think Facebook as well. Thanks for everyone putting in the comments, folks. We will be getting around to your questions at the Q&A portion. I see Janesh is saying hi to John. So thanks for tuning in, Janesh. Pratik is tuning in also from Toronto. Welcome, Pratik, and Jaya as well. So, folks, let's get this started. Now, today's topic, John, and when we chatted on the phone, like I was asking you, okay, what can we speak about, John? Like, what are you most passionate about? And obviously you're well versed with various aspects of job search, but the whole concept of interviews really was something that we kind of focused our discussion on that phone call. So that being said, John, I mean, definitely wanted to focus our discussion here on interviews, and this is an area of concern for a lot of people, actually. Like, I'm sure you get it as well. Like, I have job seekers and candidates reaching out to me all the time saying, Dean, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I don't know how to handle these interviews. And from my perspective, just to kick things off, John, like I feel like a lot of job seekers, in my experience, might not do well in interviews simply because they do not understand the purpose of an interview. So just to kind of kick things off, like, can you let the viewers know your thoughts on what the purpose of an interview is from an organization's perspective?
Sorry, Dean. I just had
sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that.
You're gonna have to repeat that again. I just lost.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so I'll repeat the question. So what I was saying is, like, from my perspective, I mean, based on my experiences and conversations with candidates, I feel like a great roadblock for a lot of job seekers is simply not understanding the purpose of an interview. So can you let the viewers know what your thoughts are on what the purpose of an interview is from an organization's perspective?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So and this is great because you're asking, the question from an organization's perspective, from, an employee's perspective. The purpose of an interview is to get the job. But as an employer who is looking to hire teammates or to bring on people into the organization, one of the things that I know that they're looking for specifically are problem solvers, right? So essentially, if a role is being posted is because there's a gap somewhere in the organization, there's a piece of work that needs to be done that can't be done by the existing resources already. So what employers will do is they'll put a posting out saying, hey, we need somebody to solve a problem. And this is everybody who's applying to roles. I want you to put on that hat as you go through that process, because it's incredibly important to know that you are a solution to a problem. So first off, you got to understand what the problem is. So regardless of the different industry that you might be working in, it could be, new marketing plans. It could be projects or, doing some sort of project management type work. It could be IT work and there's a gap and there's a knowledge skill that you're there to solve. So what we're looking for is that. And the other thing that they're also looking for are people who can mesh in well with the existing team, right? So it's the one thing I think a lot of people don't think about is, how am I going to fit in with the rest of the team? Do I collaborate well? Do I connect well? Do I engage well with others? Is there a great sense of cooperation with different team members? And this, as an employer, that's what employers are looking for. They want to know that when you come in, you're not going to be a disruptor. You're not going to be disruptive to the whole system that's already existing, that you're really there to support the organization and, moving forward. And I believe, there's some really great information out there. And actually, we do quite a bit of work on our blogs and really explaining this and how that works. Because if you're walking in with that type of mindset, you're going to walk in differently versus somebody who's just going in thinking, hey, I just need a job and I'm here to do a job. That's great. That's great because you and the other 300 people are all thinking the same thing. So the one thing that's going to separate you out from all those people is like, hey, I'm here to solve a problem that you guys are facing. And, with my skills, my experience, my knowledge, I can do that. Let me show you how. And this is where it's really around bringing your value proposition to the organization to say, hey, you know what? I am the right person for you because this is what I can do for you and the organization. So if you're bringing that in with you, it changes the conversation. It changes the dialogue that you have between yourself and the hiring manager. It just kind of changes the entire scenario to be more fruitful, to be more productive, and to say, hey, let's talk now. Like, it's between you and me. And it's not just me answering questions. It's also about me engaging and asking you questions so I can learn more about how I can bring more of that value back into the organization.
Absolutely love that, John, and I think both of us, like, I feel like we speak about this a lot on our respective channels, and I think what you basically said is, look, the reason why an organization is looking to hire someone is because they have a problem they need solved. And I definitely feel like, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Like, you need to understand what that problem is. And you also mentioned another important aspect is meshing well with the team. Like, are you going to kind of disrupt things in a good way or a bad way? And whether you're going to get along with everyone on the team, right? So totally get that. And I definitely think this is a challenge area because, and the challenge, I guess, John, is because, when job seekers are going in for their interviews, especially those of us who might be unemployed, and we're stressed out about, how are we going to pay the bills? If I don't nail this interview, how am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to pay my rent, my mortgage, and all that stuff? And you're so focused on, how do I win this, that they might lose grasp of actually figuring out and understanding what the problem is. So that's great advice, John. And for those of you watching in, I mean, there's always a problem behind the positions, which you need to figure out at the interview. Totally understand. Now, John, what are some of the major mistakes job seekers make at their interviews? And can you share some examples from your experience on that side, on the other side of the table, as a hiring manager and as a coach as well?
Yeah. Actually, I'll share an experience. And this was a personal one that I went through. And it's one that I see in a lot of people. But I use myself as an example because I don't want to call anybody out. But many years ago, I applied for a role and I went into an interview and I walked in and I knew a little bit about the company. I knew a little bit about the role. And then I got to the end of the interview, and the woman had asked me, hey, do you have any questions for me? So I wasn't prepared, right? And I responded with, well, what does your company do?
Oh.
Yeah, I know. So I know. That's why I'm using myself as an example, because I've made these mistakes too, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I find with a lot of candidates that walk into these roles, they're not going in prepared. They're not really, researching the organization. They're not researching even the people that they're being interviewed with, right? Because you have an opportunity, and this is one thing I want to let your listeners know, that you do have the opportunity to ask, if you are being invited for an interview, you can always ask, who's interviewing me? Can I get their name? And at least their name and their title, just so I can understand them. If it's fair enough for the organization to do all the research on you, it's fair enough that you do the research on the people that are bringing you in and hiring you as well. So, and that actually helps you create and establish a connection and build rapport very quickly. So if you can do that, understand the person, understand, LinkedIn, right? And we're probably on LinkedIn right now. And this is where, people are listening to us. It's really around making sure that you get to know the people that you're going to be connecting with. So whether it's a job interview or whether it's a networking event, it's the same thing. Research the people that you want to connect with. So when you have that conversation with them, and it might only be 5 minutes, in an interview, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit longer. but you want to be able to establish rapport very quickly. And this is,
Mhm.
the one thing that I hear from recruiters, like yourself in the interviews that I've done is, it takes 15 to 20 minutes to get a good conversation going.
Yeah.
So shorten up that time, that conversation time, with some input and some information about the person. So when you walk in, you can say, hey, you know what, I went through your profile and I read that, you were involved in music back in college and university, and you're now in IT. How did you make that type of transition? Like, that changes the
Yeah, absolutely.
conversation, right? Like
Totally.
it shows that you have a genuine interest in the person. And the other thing is, and I want to highlight this because this is the one thing that I find a lot of people, because I don't know if it's because of nerves or just because of people being uncomfortable about being in a new situation, but going in and treating the other person like they are the most interesting person in the world. Now,
Yeah.
imagine you walked into a room and you were totally engaged and said, hey, you are the most interesting person in the world. And I want to learn everything I can about you in the time that we have together. And when you go into the interview and you bring that type of mindset in with you, that's going to change your conversation, because now it's going to be an engaging one, right? So you think about, the question almost everybody will ask in an interview is, tell me a little bit about yourself. You
Yeah.
go through your response and then you just kind of wait for the next question.
Yeah.
Well, what if you took it and you said, hey, you responded to, tell me about yourself. And then you went to the hiring manager and said, hey, what brought you here? Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know a little bit
Yeah.
about you in terms of the research that I've done, but what's kept you here? What's kept you with this organization? What's made you want to stay in this role? Right?
Yeah.
That now initiates a different type of conversation. And it's not just it's not just somebody asking questions and somebody responding. It's really about engagement. And this is one thing I feel like what I've seen in my career in, hiring people as well is, there isn't that engagement. People are just waiting to respond. And then they think,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to impress them with my answers. No, impress me with your questions. Right.
Mhm.
That is even one thing that I believe a lot of us, we forget about. And earlier on, when I was going through the recruitment process and the hiring process, I typically would not go in with questions. Like, it wasn't something I did. It wasn't on me. It was on the organization to make sure that it was good for them. But I
Yeah.
also want to make sure, and this is what we teach our clients and our students, is how do you make sure that you're the organization's a good fit for you too, right? Because it's a two-way street. You want to be in a place where you're engaged. You want to be in a place where you have good work culture. You want to be in a place where you can be open and be collaborative with the people that you work with. So it's also interviewing the employer. And I think a lot of employees or people candidates that are going out for interviews, they forget that that's also, that's something that they have for themselves, is they can also interview. So there's a few different things. And common mistakes, just be prepared. And I feel like that is one that gets overlooked because people are applying to so many different roles. This is why we talk about limit your search criteria, limit the jobs that you apply for. Don't apply for 20, apply for 5, but know those
Yeah.
5 roles really, really well and research them really, really well. So when you do get that call and you walk into the room, it's a completely different experience for you.
Love that advice, John. And I really like what you said about how you stress the importance of it. Uh, Pretty much, I mean, having the back and forth flow of a conversation, because I think
Mhm.
that's the way you need to look at the interview, right? It's not just candidates going in there, sitting down, you ask the question, you answer the question, you wait for the next question. Like, it shouldn't be robotic from what you're saying. It has to be like a conversation. Like, it's complete. And what you're saying, John, it's completely fine to ask questions like in between, right? Like, do you have to wait
Mhm.
until, should candidates wait until the end for their interviews? Is it okay to ask questions in between?
Yeah, so I would ask. So it's a good question, Dean. So you
Yeah.
think about it. If you went to a party, would you wait for somebody to ask you all the questions and then you respond at the end of you
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
it
yeah.
just seems very unnatural, right?
Yeah.
If you and I were at a barbecue and I would ask you a slew of questions, if you were genuinely interested in me, you would ask me questions in between. Right. Unless you're
Right.
one of those people that only want to talk about themselves, which is great too, because then you become a great listener as you as you go through that process. But asking questions in between, and what you can do, and if you feel uncomfortable with doing that, you can always preface at the beginning of the conversation, hey, as we go through this, would it be okay if I ask you some questions as well?
Yeah.
And then at that point, you're setting up the person on the other side of the table to say, yeah, sure, you know what, not a problem. I would never imagine somebody would say, no, save your questions to the end, right? Like it's just, it wouldn't be, I know we're laughing, but it's just, it seems so absurd, but we get into this mode where we think, you know what, I have to wait till the end because then it's my turn. No,
Yes,
it's a
that's right.
conversation, and your turn is as you go through the entire conversation. So make use of it, right? Like you only have half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on how long your interview is. Make it a conversation and say, hey, you know what, ask me a question, I'll ask you a question. Ask me a question, I'll ask you a question. Because you really want to know about the role. And there's tons of opportunity. And what I'm going to suggest, again, going back to preparation, have these questions in mind before you walk into the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've gone through a couple of interviews already and they haven't been very successful, then you can take from those experiences and say, hey, you know what, as I went through my last interview, and actually this is an exercise everybody can do, right? You know, just kind of go back and think about that last interview that they went through. Where could they have injected questions into the interview to make it more conversational?
Yeah.
And then that'll give you an indication of what kind of questions you would ask. Hey, you know, I want to ask questions about the organization. I want to ask questions about the culture within the organization. You know, even doing a walkthrough through the building, you can get a pretty good idea of whether or not people are collaborative and people are connecting, because people will be standing. Well, not anymore. Like today, we're all on, you know, we're doing video chats and stuff like that. But you know, before COVID, you know, you could walk through a building and you would get a really good idea on what the company culture was like. Are people sitting down? Are they talking? Are they conversing? Are they working together? Are they collaborating? Today, you just want to make sure that you're the one that can show that, right? Like the onus is on you to bring your best into the interview room with you, right? So yeah, be prepared. You know, go in with a list of questions that, you know, from your last experience, you could have brought into, you could bring into your next experience to make sure that you make that conversation a lot more fruitful.
Awesome, amazing, and just some quick shout outs. I see Manavi's tuned in. Hey Manavi, thanks for tuning in. Sandeep, thanks for tuning in. And we got some, and then Kamlesh says, great point about conversational interviews. Completely agree. Should be natural. All right, thanks for your comment, Kamlesh, and for that feedback. And John, you also mentioned, I guess something, you know, I guess very important, like in terms of researching the people that you're about to meet with. Now, this is an interesting concern I get from candidates, and they're always like, Dean, is it okay if I look at someone's LinkedIn profile? Like, what if they check, you know, the viewed my profile thing? They see that they viewed my profile. Is it going to creep them out? What are your thoughts on that, John? Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, is it going to creep them out? I don't. So here's my hallucination, right? My hallucination is if somebody's got something posted publicly, then it's open for anybody to go view. So there's no limitation or restrictions. If somebody doesn't want you to know something, they just won't put it out there publicly. So is it going to freak them out? I'm going to say no. I think more than anything, and I've seen in several situations where it has been a benefit to be able to do that. You know, one of the things that we teach is, you know, get engaged with the people online before you actually walk into the room, right? So if you do get interviewed by a hiring manager and you know who they are, what you can do is you can go through their posts, you can engage with them on their post, you can comment on their posts, you can share your ideas and you know some of your thoughts around what they're posting, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to contradict everything they're posting, I would recommend you stay away from that.
Not a good strategy. Not a good strategy.
Not a good strategy. You don't want to be that guy. Hey, you're that guy who made that mention on my post. No, you want to be the person who is, you know, engaging. You can share ideas. You can provide feedback. You can even take another article or take a piece of information and say, hey, you know what? I love what you said here. And I'm just going to add to this, you know, with some of the information that I found out there, and it might be of value to you. So here you go. So yeah, no, I would say, you know, engage with the people. I don't think it's creepy. You know, I've had several people who've interviewed with me years ago, you know, look me up on LinkedIn, and it gave me an idea of now I can look at their LinkedIn profiles and see what they're all about outside of what's written on their resume, right? Because you think about LinkedIn or any other social platform, it's really an extension of who you are and what you're capable of delivering. That's not written on a sheet or two sheets of paper, right? So
Absolutely.
it's another way to get visibility, and that's the key here, right? So, you know, when there's 100 or 200 or 300 applicants for every position, you want to get the visibility before everybody else does, and you want to separate yourself out. And here's the thing. People aren't necessarily going to do the work, and then they wonder, you know, why am I not getting these callbacks? Why am I not getting responses from people? make yourself visible. And you think about it, and if I use the example of McDonald's, they don't necessarily make the best hamburgers, right? Maybe they do, for some, but they're not gourmet hamburgers. But they are everywhere, right? And you see them plastered everywhere. They're advertised everywhere. And this is why people go and eat McDonald's, right? Because it's just there. And I'm using them as an example. It could be Starbucks. It could be anything, right? You just want to make sure that you get that visibility, because that's the thing that makes you stand out. It's the one thing that makes you get noticed. So, and that's going to be key, especially in today's environment. There's a lot of people that are out there looking for work along with you, right? So you're not there by yourself. It's not like one or two people apply for a role. You're talking about hundreds of people. You want to make sure you stand out, you're visible, so people notice you. And when you get noticed, that's when people get curious. And when they get curious, they want to know more about you. And that's where you got to make sure you have a whole bunch of different things that are ready to present to them, whether it's on social, whether it's on a resume or a cover letter. Yes, I said cover letter, one of those dreaded words that people don't think about, but those are just as important. So making sure that you're ready with all those things are going to help you stand out and really separate you out from the rest of the competition, the other candidates that are out there.
Love that, John. I love what you mentioned about the visibility. Like, that's so important. And those are some great strategies that you shared. I hope those of you watching are taking notes, because that's some like top level, CIA kind of stuff there. But
CIA.
All right. Yeah. But so John, I mean, you've already provided some great advice, but what are some of your top tips for job seekers in being well prepared for their interviews? Like, anything else you want to add? Like, how can they best prepare for their interviews?
Yeah. Actually, and this is good, because this reminds me, going back to our initial conversation on this topic, is around mindset, right? And what are you bringing into the room with you? What are you unconsciously bringing into the room with you? And this is one of the things I want to highlight, that, the one thing I tell, my clients and students to do is whatever you do, don't watch the news before you go into an interview, because that's like the worst thing. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen too many happy events be posted on the news, right? There's some sort of crisis, something's blowing up, or somebody, something bad is happening in the world, and that's what gets highlighted. And this is what's happening in your mind. Your mind is processing these things, and in an unconscious way, it is priming you. So And I want to take a second and talk about priming. So priming is what sets you up for the thing that follows. So for example, if you stub your toe first thing in the morning, there's a good chance that the rest of your day is going to be a bit challenging because you stubbed your toe, you're in a bad mood, and then, you run out of toothpaste in the toothpaste container, and then, you spill your coffee. Like, there's a whole bunch of sequences that happen, but it happens because of that one thing that happened initially, which is the stubbing of the toe, and that creates priming. So you think about interviews. What are you listening to? What are you prepping yourself with before you walk into the room? Is it with good, healthy, positive messaging? And if it's not, then, go back and revisit, because those are the things that you bring into the room with you. If you feel confident before you walk in, you're going to show up confident. If you show up nervous and you're going to show up, thinking, hey, my last interview was a disaster, and I hope I don't do that again. What's going to happen? It's going to happen again, because that's what your mind is processing, and it's priming you with, right? So one of the things, and actually I'm going to cover it this weekend in one of my webinars that I'm going to be hosting, is really around creating a routine that sets you up for success, right? So if you think about the great athletes in the world, right? Whether it's not Kobe, the former Kobe Bryant, who's no longer with us, but you think about, Michael Jordan, you think about, wrestlers, like you name it, the top performing athletes in the world, they all have a routine and a sequence of things that they do to prime themselves for the game, right? LeBron James, he doesn't sit around on the chair waiting for the game to start. He has a routine that he does game after game after game. And you think about even the Raptors, Lowry is one of those people that has a routine that they do and a sequence that they follow before they start every single game. So what is your success sequence? What's your success routine? And if you don't have one, it's time to build one out, because it's the things that are going to get you pumped up before you walk into the room. And I think about when I was getting onto stages very early on, I had this success routine that built me up to when I got on stage to deliver a talk. And that ensured that every time I got up there, I was consistent in what I was delivering. And that's what your success routine does. It creates consistency in you, so you show up the same every single time, and you want to show up at your best.
Love that advice, John. And I find it interesting. I think you're probably one of the few people that actually speak about this, but it's so crucial. right? I mean, how you set your day up, like what are you listening to? Are you listening to positive messages? Like if you are already anxious to start with, like imagine watching the news like before your interviews, right? Like so folks, I mean, this is excellent advice. What John's saying, listen to positive messages, motivational stuff, maybe set yourself up for success before the interviews. I love that advice, John. Like, I mean, that's so key and crucial, I believe. Now, moving on to the topic of building confidence, and I definitely wanted to discuss, given your experience with NLP, John, how do job seekers build confidence for interviews? This is something I get asked so often because a lot of people get a little, antsy and anxious, obviously, before their interviews. How do you build that confidence, and how do you get over that anxiety before and during the interviews? And any tips from an NLP standpoint as well?
Yeah. So I kind of covered that already. The NLP covers priming. So, and that's one of the things that I just talked about. That's one piece of it. How to get over anxiety and how to get over that initial stress or nervousness. From what I've seen, and the people that we've worked with, it's really around preparation. When you go in prepared, and the reason people get nervous is because they're not 100% prepared. They just kind of show up and say, "Hey, I'm going to go for this. I'm just going to pray that everything goes well." Yeah. It's like, okay, that's not a very good strategy. Right? The strategy comes from really preparing. So when you go in, and preparation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that stuff, but very highly and very quickly, preparation is, hey, do I know what questions I'm going to be asked? And do I have responses to those questions? If I don't have responses to those questions going into the room, that's part of my homework, right? And you need to put work into preparing for this, right? And you think about it, when you think about a job, it's not something you're getting paid $10 for. It's not something you're getting paid $50 for. We're talking about, depending on the job that you're applying for, it could be between 50 or 150,000, right? Totally, and if you don't put the preparation in to get that role, then you're going to reap what you sow. So reap the good stuff, like sow the good stuff, so you can reap the better stuff. And what I find with candidates who actually do go in prepared and they know and they're confident and they have all the responses ready, the one thing that's going to stand out for them is they're going to show up differently, right? They're going to say, hey, yeah, you know what, I know what you're talking about. I understand the questions you're asking me. I understand the value I'm going to bring into this organization, and this is the value. I know what my value is, and let me show what that is. So from an NLP perspective, though, in order to build confidence, so addressing anxiety and stress, you do it through preparation. Confidence is something that we've all experienced at one point or other in our lives, right? So you think about all the different scenarios that you've been through. You think about all the challenges that you've been through. You've come out of them stronger and more positive on the other side of them. A really simple exercise is just going back and just kind of closing your eyes and going back into that moment and feel what you were feeling. Stand the way you were standing and really dive into that moment. Right. And feel it and really feel it. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you use your body, because this is one of the things, whether it's Amy Cuddy, she talks about this, or even like a Tony Robbins, it's around moving your physiology to empower what you're feeling already, because that's what creates a very confident and positive state. So if somebody's depressed, you can tell that they're depressed just by looking at the way they're standing and the way their physiology is reflecting back, right? If you want to be confident, it's something as simple. And actually, if the people are listening into this call right now, just stand up. If you're sitting down right now, stand up. And I'm going to invite you to just lift your chest up, right? Just by doing that, you're going to start to feel, I know, look, Dean, I can see it on your face,
I feel
right?
it as well. Yeah.
Like, right? Yeah, you start to feel a different type of energy, right? Now imagine if you could anchor this in with, what, I'm standing up tall, I'm chest up. Even the way you sit in your chair is going to really, it's going to demonstrate how you are in terms of your confidence level. If you're slouched over, kind of hung over your chair, and you think about it, if I talk like this the whole time, how would you guys really, would you guys even be entertained by this conversation, right? Like, no, man, I don't want to talk to you. Your voice is monotone. You keep saying the same thing and you're pretty flat. But if I stand up and I, just bring in the energy, and we all have the capability to do that because we've all experienced that at some point. All you got to do is go back to that point and bring it to this current moment. And no matter what you're going through, you can always bring back that energy. You can bring that positivity, that confidence, because it's things that you've already experienced. And just by having that routine, and I talked about, the success routine, building out that success routine is going to ensure that you get to that point where you feel incredibly empowered and incredibly confident. as you go through your interview. So, set that up as you go through it. And when you're in the room, and actually I did an interview with a master NLP practitioner as well, very early on when I was doing my podcast. And he talked about, where you place your hands on the table is going to have an indication of, where your confidence level is at. The way you use your body, and because we're projecting on video, the way you're projecting and speaking into the microphone is going to have a big impact in terms of your confidence level as well. Right. So if I'm completely confident, I'm going to speak straight to you. And a lot of people will, they'll look down, they'll look at other stuff that's going on the screen. I'm like, look straight at the camera, man. Like, that's going to say, hey, I'm connected with you. I'm here for you. And I want to make sure I give you the best value. So there's these little things and these little tweaks that you can do that really change the outcome of your interview by just bringing in, a positive attitude, but not just a positive attitude, changing your physiology to match your attitude and your confidence level. It's going to make a world of difference.
Love that, John. So, I mean, like, just making that conscious change, even in your body language, how you're standing, how you're sitting, that'll affect the way you think as well, is what you're saying, basically.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Just like you did it, right? Like, you sat up, you had your chest up, like, it just, it's such a simple thing, right? You want to change your mood, you just, straighten up your back, chest up, like, it's that simple. And if the longer you hold this, the more confident you're going to feel over time, right? So Amy Cuddy, she talks about doing the superhero pose and holding that for 2 minutes. That in itself will bring up your confidence level, right? It lowers down your cortisol, your stress level, and it increases, I forget what it's called, but it increases something else in your body. I think it's serotonin that gives you that happy feeling, that confident feeling, right? So you can do that with your body, and it's really around changing your body. And a lot of, what we talk about in neuro-linguistic programming is really shifting what happens in our unconscious, because what happens a lot of time is our unconscious mind will speak on our behalf without knowing. And this is why priming is incredibly important, right? Prime yourself with the right things. So when you're in the room, you're speaking from a place that's positive, a place that's confident, and a place that's empowering, right? And that's what it's all about. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's a snippet of what you could do to really stand out, right? Like to be at your best.
Awesome, amazing, and I see one of our viewers, Nikki Jones. I think she really likes that. Nikki says yes. Awesome. Thanks for your comment.
Thanks, Nikki. Yeah.
And so totally. And I remember watching this documentary once, and I think it was like, if you put your hands up like that, it emulates the sense of winning or something like that. Like at the end of a race or something, or or something like that. But that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, we can do the rest of the interview like this, Dean. Like,
let's just do it like that. Everybody, actually, all the viewers as well. Just put your hands up.
Yeah. Get your body into it. Like, it's really, it's that simple, right? I think a lot of times people are looking for, hey, I want to do something that makes me confident. All you got to do is just a little small tweak in your body and your posture to get that, right? Like, you don't have to do, you can do mantras, you can do affirmations, you can do all that stuff, which is fantastic, something I recommend as well. But, if you just change your physiology very quickly, you can get a different type of result instantly. So,
love that, John. Now, John, in terms of the topic of building rapport at interviews, like, what are some ways you suggest? I know you have shared some great suggestions so far, but anything you want to add to that in terms of what's the best way to build rapport? And before we get to that, even, how important is it to really build rapport at interviews?
Wow. So how important is it to build rapport? Dean, if you and I hadn't established rapport, all those, I think it's been like 2 years now. Or
I think so, yeah.
We wouldn't be here right now, right?
That's
so
right.
Rapport is what actually builds the relationship. And the reason we built rapport is we had a common interest to start us off, and also, just doing the work that you do. And I was treating you like you were the most interesting person in the world.
That's
right?
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
I talked about earlier, and just being genuinely interested in what you're doing. And all I did was just ask you a series of questions. And then we had a couple of back and forths. I interviewed you. Rapport is incredibly important, right? So it tells me, hey, if we have rapport, you're the type of person I want to work with because I understand, or I get an idea of who you are. Do we have the same type of values? Do we have the same type of beliefs? Are we going to be able to move towards something together? Or, when there's a goal that, the department or the group or the organization's trying to meet, are we aligned in terms of how we get there? So establishing rapport is incredibly important. And the goal is to do it quickly, right? You know, there's other strategies. I don't want to give away all my secrets because then nobody's going to listen to me on other stuff. But there are specific strategies that you can use to build rapport. And it's really around listening to the other person, right? Asking those questions, just asking questions and then building on those questions, those responses back from the person that's responding to you can help you build rapport, right? And you think about, you know, when you and we first met and we started asking each other questions, I asked you a question and I built on top of that question, and you would ask me a question, and we just had this really, really good back and forth. And here we are, you know, together. This is our third engagement together where we're sharing some really good information with our community, because our common value and belief is we want to give value back to the community, and that's what we're doing. So because I know that's your value and that's your belief, you know, I will continue doing work with you whenever you ask. You know, I'll drop everything that I'm doing just to get onto a call with you to share some of that information and value back to the community. And that's what rapport will do. Rapport will say, hey, you know what? I'm willing to help out this person, and I'll do whatever it takes to get that person, you know, the support and help that they need. And that's why, you know, building rapport in a room. And I'm sure some of the listeners are wondering, like, but how do I do that? Like, how do I, you know, how do I establish rapport? Well, you get to know the person before you walk into the room, because they're getting to know you before you walk into the room. So this way, when you start having that conversation with them, you can say, hey, you know, I saw that you were a music teacher at one point, or, you know, you did some nonprofit work, or you're affiliated with a nonprofit organization, or you went to this type of school. That's where you can start building your rapport, because now you're starting to find a common element between the two of you, right? And I think that's the starting point. That's like the ignition point for any good conversation is, what do we have in common, and how can we leverage that piece of commonality to launch a conversation? So something to think about as you go through, and, you know, and that's just a small one, right? As you go through your interview process, what's the one thing that you have in common with the other person, and leverage that to start building conversation from that.
Love that. Now, John, but like, you know, that being mentioned now, and this is something that I really wanted to ask you, is that how do you make sure you don't cross the line into that rapport building coming across as, how do I explain this? Like, you know, kind of like it's not really genuine. Like, you're just searching for things to connect on. Like, how do you make sure you don't cross that line? You understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. You don't want to come off fake or in disingenuine, I guess is the word.
Disingenuine. Yeah, that's right.
Disingenuine. So you got to be genuine, right? So and you think, and I'll use myself an example. Very early on, you know, I'm not the person I am today. I've actually taken a lot of time and effort and education and training to get myself to where I am today. Like, I wasn't always like this. You know, just being genuine with you wasn't something, you know, I used to think about, you know, and if I go back 20 years, it's like, okay, so how can I have a conversation with Dean that's going to leverage and that's going to be beneficial to me, right? So, right. So, and as we go into, and as candidates go into interviews with managers, you know, they're thinking, what can I say that will get the manager to like me and to hire me, right? So that's not genuine, right? Because that is one-sided, and that's just you getting what you want and not being able to offer value back, right? How you tear that down is being genuinely interested and genuinely being genuine, right? Walking into the room and saying, hey, you know what? This is who I am. I'm going to bring my best here, and I'm going to do the best that I can. But I don't have an ulterior motive, right? Yeah. And this is where I see a lot of candidates, you know, even people, and I'm sure you see this too, people that reach out to you, they'll say, hey, you know, I listened to you to one of your sessions, to one of your live videos. You know, I loved it, and that's the first message. And then the second message is, hey, here's my resume.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's not genuine, right? Because that first message is really just setting you up for the second one. It could be, you know, if somebody was genuine to say, hey, I loved what you were sharing, I loved your content. They watch the second video. Hey, I love that. And I loved how you interviewed. And they take something specific out of that conversation and they share it back with you. The third message would be, hey, Dean, you know what? Based on what you were talking about in your last two interviews, I found this really good piece of information I'd love to share with you. And then it's like, hey, Dean, I'm currently in the market looking for something. What would you have in terms of recommendations for jobs, right? So instead of coming straight out there and saying, hey, can you give me a job? It's like, what would you recommend? And it's really seeking advice, not asking, right? So when people go in and they ask for things right away without building rapport, you're gonna ruin that relationship. And for the people that are listening, I really want you to take that home, because that's incredibly important. If you want to turn somebody off really quickly, you just say, here's my resume, give me a job. And people are going to say, well, what the heck? I don't know you. And the example I use in my workshops is, it's like going up to a stranger on the street and saying, hey, can you give me $100?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So what would you say? You'd be like, I don't know you. Why would I do that for you? Right. But if you got to know me and you understood me and you knew where I was coming from, and, if I built even a little bit of rapport and I shared a little bit of a story with you, and I said, hey, you know what? I'm struggling right now. I need $100 to go do something. Would you be more inclined to want to help me?
Yeah.
I would think the answer is yes, right? Depending on the person that you are. But if somebody was genuine and really needed my help and support, there's nothing I wouldn't do to want to help them, right? And and I've done that. I've had conversations with people on the street, homeless people or whatever. I know it seems a little weird, but it's just to have those conversations. And then if I feel like donating or supporting them somehow, I will, and I won't feel bad about it. And it's not just $1 or $2; it'll be whatever it is, right? So building and establishing rapport and connection is going to be incredibly important. And I shared a strategy on how to do that, right? Just take time, right? Everybody's rushing.
Yeah.
And you can't rush, right? You can't go from the date to the wedding. You have to go through a series of courting before you can get to the actual wedding date, if I'm using that as a metaphor. You don't go, hey, I love you, let's get married tomorrow. Like, who does that? Well, some people do, right? Like, but the whole TV show dedicated to that. But the reality is, you're going to get to know somebody before you get to that point. And it's going to be the same for an employer who's bringing you on into their organization. They have 1 or 2 touch points with you. They're going to screen you through a recruiter. They're going to screen you through a manager. They might screen you through a panel. They might even bring you in for a third interview if they're going to bring you up at a higher level. But at every level, you need to establish rapport with the people in the room. And if you can do that, that's what's going to make you stand out. And if you get to the third level, it's really around closing the deal, right? It's like, hey, you've gone through those 2 cycles. It's like, what are you going to do to make sure that you've been consistent throughout that entire process? Because it's not about just being good once. It's about being good every single time you get up and you talk to people.
Totally.
So so it's something to think about as you go through the process, right?
Totally. No, yeah, love that advice, John. And you pretty much hit it on the knob. Like, I get these messages all the time. And it's like, hey, Dean, just messaging you to find out how you're doing and all that. And then I know any moment now there's going to be a follow-up message, right? It's like, hey, Dean, by the way, I'm on the market. Here's my resume. And, I get it. I get it. I'm pretty sure, people who do that, they don't do it intentionally.
No, and you're right. I don't think they do it out of malice. I think they just do it of not knowing better, right? So there is a better way. So this is part of your preparation, right? So be prepared. So when you are doing and building that rapport, and even whether it's online, it's in person, it's the same process, right? You take time to get to know somebody over time. Right. And if somebody doesn't respond back to you, don't take it as, hey, this person doesn't like me because they're not responding back to me. Just take it as, hey, what can I do to make that better? So that person will want to respond back to me. What can I do to ensure that I get a conversation going? And maybe you ask a question, right? And it's the same thing you would do over a video chat while you're doing an interview, or whether you're in a live networking type of event. Questions, man, like you want to make it really easy. You want to have the best conversation in the world. Have a series of questions that you're just going to ask without ever responding back to anything. And you'll find like you can create an incredibly dynamic conversation with somebody just by asking them question and question and question and question.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got some great feedback here from Jayesh. Jayesh says, thanks, John, for these tips. The examples you provided are quite insightful. Awesome. Happy to hear that, Jayesh. And some who I think this is Sundus. Sundus says, hi, Dean, another great interview. Loving it. Awesome. Thanks so much for your feedback, Sundus. And got Nikhil here. Nikhil saying, hello, Dean and John. Good to see you both. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, Nikhil. So, John, that being said, now another, I guess, I guess part of questioning, I get from job seekers. I get a lot of newcomers, who might be tuning in here, as well as people who I'm sure you have newcomers reaching out to you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be some cultural differences in the way interviews are conducted over here, right, compared to other parts in the world. What advice can you give to newcomers on adapting to and adjusting to the local interactions over here from an interview standpoint?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. 100%. Interviews are different here. The one thing that I do know is referrals carry a lot of weight. So if somebody's referring you to somebody else, that's gonna mean a lot. But a lot of it is just understanding the environment that you're applying to, right? So the one thing that we recommend, whenever you have the chance, is to do informational interview sessions with people, right? To get an idea of what it is they're looking for. Like it shouldn't be guesswork. Like you should not be going in not prepared. When it comes to an interview in a Canadian environment, it's really around, what's the value that you bring? How are you going to integrate with my team? Same things I talked about before. And how are you going to integrate into the organization? And do you understand what Canadian culture looks like? Canadian work culture or Canadian corporate culture, depending on where you're applying. And if you don't know what that looks like, go do your research, right? Go understand in Canadian organizations, this is how they're structured. Because the one thing, even structure-wise, right? I think about people that I've talked to that are in Southeast Asia. And the one thing you would never do is talk to your superior. Like it's just something you don't do because it's a sign of disrespect. In North American culture, you know what? You can talk to a manager, you can talk to a director, you can even talk to a VP. Like that is acceptable behavior here, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the organization. Not every organization is like that, but for the majority of the bigger organizations, the ones that talk about diversity and inclusion, they're all open to having those conversations with anybody at any level inside the organization. So getting a really good idea of what Canadian culture looks like and being prepared, right? Like really understanding that, in Canadian companies, how you act and interact with people is going to have a big bearing. How you speak to people is very different than how you would speak to people in Australia, because people in Australia are very direct. And, if they have some criticism or some feedback, it's not necessarily soft feedback. It's pretty hard feedback. And I'm not picking on the Australians. It's just what I've heard. And, from the Australians that I've spoken to, they're like, man, you Canadians are so soft. And you guys are so like, you're not direct. Like, how do I know what you're saying? Like, I don't even know what you're saying because you're so soft about it. But there is like understanding that there is that difference, right? Like, and that's going to make a huge difference as you're going through the process through the interview, right? Yeah. So, understand go talk to people, right? Like, so if you don't know anything about, what the Canadian environment or work environment looks like, go talk to people and say, hey, what's it like inside your company? How do you guys deal with this type of scenario? Because I even think about interview questions like, hey, tell me about a time you've had a conflict with somebody. And what we know about people, people that I've interviewed and people that I've coached from the Middle East is like, we never, ever, ever have conflicts with anybody. Like we just don't. Because if we do, we can get fired, right? So I'm like, okay, well, I know, but so if somebody says, what would you do in case of a conflict? You don't say, well, I would just listen to my superior and do whatever they tell me to do. Like that, that's not the right answer for this type of work environment. Like those are the little subtle differences that you got to be aware of, right? So in Canadian culture, if you have a conflict, and I tell, especially for the young people that I coach, right? When I say, hey, if you think about a conflict, going to a movie and you're with 3 or 4 friends and you guys aren't aligned on what movie to watch, like that's a conflict. How did you work through that conflict? How did you get to a resolution that was satisfactory to everybody? Like you can even use something like that, something as simple as that, as an example of a time that you had conflict. If you don't actually have conflicts in work and any other environment. And listen, if you live in a house, if you've been in a house for the last 10, 12, 14 weeks with your family, I am sure you've run into conflicts at some point. So you can even use those conflicts. Everybody thinks, every example I provide for my interview needs to come from work. It doesn't necessarily need to come from work. It's really around showing your behavior, how you adapt, how you can change and shift, in different scenarios. And that's what's going to be key to your success as you go through the interview.
Awesome. Love that, John. And Nikhil says Canadians love small talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for your comment, Nikhil.
Yeah.
So John, I mean, I do understand you have a great webinar coming up. I believe it's over this weekend. Can
Yeah.
you tell the
Yeah.
viewers about that? In the meantime, I'm going to drop the link in the comments while you let the viewers know about that. And I think the website is www.canadianjobsearchacademy.com/webinar. Is that the address?
Yeah, CanadianJobSearchAcademy.com/webinar. Yeah, no, and what we're going to be talking about is exactly what we're talking about today. I'm just going to be embellishing some of the not embellishing, but I'm going to be expanding on some of the concepts that I've shared here in that webinar. So that's going to be on Saturday at 10:30 a.m. So, I'm like, who wants to get up at 10:30 on a Saturday and listen to the webinar? And the way I see it,
Only the
yeah,
committed.
only the committed, 100%. So if you're committed to this and you want to succeed, if you're struggling right now, we're going to share some of these concepts with you, and we're going to share some other ones as well in terms of what you can do to conquer some of those interview fears as you're in the room with the hiring manager, because these are all things that we've seen and with the people that we've worked with, we've seen some great success in just changing these little things, right? And it's not you changing as a person. And, people think, oh, I need to be a different person as I walk into the room. It's not about that. It's really around highlighting what you already have within you. And, my personal belief is we already have all this greatness inside of us, and we forget that, right? And when we get nervous, we forget that even more. So how do we walk into that scenario feeling empowered and confident? So, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So yeah,
Awesome,
so that'll
amazing.
be coming up this Saturday as well. So yeah,
Amazing.
I'm really happy about that.
Awesome, amazing, John. So, folks, I put in the link in the comments. You should be able to see that in the comments. So make sure you sign up for the webinar. John's going to be, I guess, John, you're the main presenter for that, or is there anyone else?
I'll be hosting this. My partner Connell will be opening it up, but and I'll be doing the walkthrough. We've got a series of different webinars that are happening or going to be happening over the next couple of weeks, because we know that as COVID starts to level off a little bit, employers are now getting more comfortable with rehiring again. So we want to make sure that we prepare people as the opportunities show up for them. And I think there's going to be quite a few opportunities that are going to be showing up for a series of different people. So definitely. What we can do to help out is, through our webinars and the various things that we do. So, yeah.
Awesome. Amazing. So Rosaria says, yes, John, I am committed. Looking forward to be a part of it. Awesome. Congratulations, nice. Rosaria. Yeah, make sure you sign up for that. And now, John, before we get into the Q&A, and hopefully you're okay on the time, but can you tell us a bit more about Zero2Hired as well as the Canadian Job Search Academy, how you can help clients and people out there?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So Zero2Hired is actually the Canadian Job Search Academy is what we renamed Zero2Hired.
I see. Okay.
So it's now called the Canadian Job Search Academy is what we set up. We started with a book initially, and over the last 3 years, really, and that's we've been really working. We've been pounding the pavement on really getting the information out there to candidates, because even this all stemmed from a situation and a challenge that I faced in 2009 when I was outsourced for my own role, and just preparing and getting people ready. I had a team of 25 people. I got them prepared, and everybody who was going to be let go ended up getting jobs, like 100% of people. So that generated a curiosity inside of me in terms of, how can I help other people, right? So we've been on this journey to really help people through the Canadian Job Search Academy by giving them the tools to be successful. And what we do know about newcomers is there's newcomers that arrive in this country and they're working survival jobs. And I have a personal belief that nobody needs to be doing that as long as you know how to show up at your best. Don't get me wrong, there are fields that are regulated, so those are things that you need to be aware of. But for unregulated fields, there's no reason why you shouldn't be getting a job that's either at your level, almost at your level, or just above your level. And it's really around understanding the work environment here in Canada. And that's one of the things that we focus on really teaching the people the difference between, how's it different out there and how's it different here. Let us show you how to succeed in this environment. So it doesn't matter if you're from South America, if you're from Southeast Asia, you're from China, Australia, even Europe is different than it is here. Really understanding what it means to succeed here. And our goal is to get people into equivalent type roles when they arrive. And we've even seen, some of the people that we've worked with, they've gotten job offers before they even left their home country. So, that makes
That's
us
amazing.
incredibly happy and incredibly proud to be a part of that. And, we get to be a part of people's success stories. And that's the Canadian dream. And we want to be a part of
That's
that
right.
instead of, the part of the Canadian dream that says, hey, it's incredibly difficult to get a job in Canada.
Yeah.
And how am I going to do this? Nobody cares about me. Everybody thinks I'm overqualified. It's really around taking out the pieces of your profile in your interview. They're going to make you stand out. So that's what we teach, and that's what we focus on.
Awesome. Amazing. And that will be, I guess, in the main website, right? www.canadianjobsearchacademy.com for information about all your services. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
John, do you have a few more minutes for some questions? We do have some
I got
audience
like
questions.
2 or 3 minutes. So we'll see what we can bang out in that time. All right, team?
All right. Perfect. Yeah, we'll wrap this up 3:30 sharp. So, folks, I'm going to try and get through as many questions. But so Tilak says, hi, this is Tilak from Toronto. What would be the best way to ask for desired salary?
Yes. So great question. Actually, this is one, we surveyed, some of the people are going to be attending our webinar this coming weekend. And when it comes to salary, know what the acceptable range is for you. So do your research in advance, right? Do your preparation and, use a website like Glassdoor, for example. Look at the job title that you're applying for and understand what they normally pay and what the range is, right? And ideally, from what I've seen in successful candidates is, supply a range, right? So a range from here to there, whatever that is. It could be from 50 to 55,000, or 80 to 85,000. But the lower end of your range, and this is what I want people to think about, the lower end of your range is the minimum that you're willing to accept for that role, right? So if you're in a job interview and the range or the salary is between 65 and 85,000, don't say 65,000 if you really want 80,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
So be prepared, but you got to make sure that your experience, your skills speak to that amount of money in terms of, actually most jobs you wouldn't have that big a range, but whatever you're going to offer as the low part of your range is what you're willing to accept. Because if an employer comes back to you and says, hey, you know what range are you willing to accept? You say, hey, between 65 and 75,000. But if you're not willing to accept anything less than 70, then that's the bottom end of your range. Right? Because if an employer comes back and offers you 75 or 65,000, you can't be upset with them because you're the one that said, hey, it's okay, I'll accept this. Right? That's
right.
And I've seen candidates come back after, receiving a job offer saying, hey, can I get some more money? It's like, no, you put this as an acceptable range for you. So, that's what you're going to get. Sorry. Next question. I'll try to
make absolutely. But thanks, Tilak. Hope that was helpful for you, Tilak. Amir asks, how do you answer the question when the interviewer asks, tell me something about yourself which is not on the resume? Great question, Amir. What do you have to say about that, John?
Oh, man. I'm giving away all my material for the weekend. Actually, I'm going to cover this particular one on the weekend.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, all right.
No, but really quickly, whatever you're going to do, and here's one tip, right? Don't recite your resume back to the person because that's already in front of them, right? Tell them something that's not on the resume. Right. I'll cover that this weekend. So unfortunately, you're going to have to jump into my webinar to find out what that is. But there's a way to answer that question that's going to be a lot more effective than just reciting your education and your skills, things that are already indicated on your resume.
Awesome. Amazing. Thanks so much, John. Amr, so you got to hop onto the webinar for the full details on that. So make sure you sign up. John, thank you so much for your time. And you shared so much great knowledge and wisdom about the interviews as well as the job search. And just thanks so much. And I definitely look forward to us doing more of these in the future. For the viewers, make sure you thank John in the comments. We're going to wrap this up right now, folks. Thanks so much for everyone tuning in, and we'll connect again next time. Thanks again, John. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.